Hey everyone, it's Friday, December 6th. Let's talk PlayStation. Happy Gran Turismo 6 Day for anybody that is actually going out and buying that. Obviously, PlayStation channel, we cover a lot of PlayStation exclusives. Gran Turismo is a huge PlayStation franchise. I, in particular, have never been a huge racing simulator fan, so that's why I'll cover news. I'll acknowledge Gran Turismo's existence, but you'll probably never see like a review or gameplay or anything because I'm so bad at racing simulators. But it's GT6 Day, so let me know if you guys bought it and are enjoying it. It's getting good reviews. But speaking of racing simulators, well, it's not completely a racing simulator. People are giving different opinions on it. But Driveclub, we got some news about that. So, of course, Driveclub was delayed. It was supposed to be for the PS4's launch, and it's going into early next year. Well, now we know it might be coming around February time. User on NeoGAF spotted this little image showing the PS4's launch lineup for Japan, and it looks like Driveclub is going to be making it for then, which is February 22nd. So, which would mean it's falling right in line with our expectations, so early next year for Driveclub. So, I would assume around that time also for the US, Europe, and other territories in general. It's weird with Driveclub. Some say it is a racing simulator. Some say it feels more arcadey. So I'll have to give a feel for it. If it's too racing simulator-y, then I probably wouldn't be very good at it. I'm an arcade racer. Who loves PlayStation 3 firmware updates? I know I just loved them last generation. Couldn't get enough of them. There's an optional one available right now, 4.53. Software stability. It also says some closed captioning for certain Blu-ray titles and DVD titles. There might be something more in there. Sometimes when Sony releases a small, sometimes optional firmware update, there is some, tidbits in there that they won't tell you about, like trophy hiding. I think they didn't tell you about directly with the PS Vita firmware that was updated a little while ago. But it's out. I haven't looked into it yet to see if there's anything extra in there, but probably just software stability. And you guys know I love my software stability. So one thing we don't talk about often is Sony's closed studios. Sony owns many developers. They own 12 right now. But in the past, they've actually closed some of their own developers, like Zipper Interactive, Sony Liverpool, big studios. I think there's others that I'm missing. But Sony Liverpool, for example, they did the Wipeout series. They've been credited with other titles, but they're mostly known for the Wipeout series on PlayStation. Well, they were closed, and now they're actually back, kind of. Ex-Sony Liverpool employees have come together to make Firesprite Studios. So this was just confirmed this week that they are pretty much back, and they have a new studio made. And it's been confirmed that they helped Sony Japan work on the Playroom, the little camera app that's pre-installed in every PlayStation 4. So they've been around. They've already worked on a project that they've worked with Sony. They're an independent studio right now, but obviously they do have solid Sony connections, so it makes sense that they were still working closely with them to help that project, kind of get the studio up, I guess, kind of get it running, kind of get some money flowing. I would have to assume that's what was going on. But the studio is stressing that they are now independent. They're not owned by Sony anymore. These are still the same people that worked on PlayStation platforms for how many years? Well over 15 years, but they're independent now, so they'll probably move multi-platform, I'm assuming, with their new game coming out, which they are working on a new game. Now let's move on to The Order 1886. This is, of course, a PS4 exclusive by Ready at Dawn, but that's pretty much all we know about it, just a synopsis. We've seen some images. Game Informer had a little bit of coverage on the game, but we still don't know a whole lot about it, and we still don't know, of course, when it's going to come out. There's not a rumor because we kind of see it, but some tweets kind of talking about how the game might be coming fall 2014. The Ready at Dawn founder was tweeting a Sony Santa Monica employee, and I guess I'll just display him right now, but you can kind of just read it right there, like, hey, blah, blah, PS4's best console ever. And Tim Moss goes, yeah, looking forward to what you're going to make it do in fall, winky face, tongue sticking out. Andrea Pacino of Ready at Dawn goes, yeah, me too, winky face. And that's pretty much all we have to go by in terms of The Order 1886's release date. But, I mean, it's kind of, seems like it's right there in the card. It seems like what they're aiming for. It's pretty public how they kind of talked about it. It's just one of those things, man. Like, you can not believe it or believe it, but, like, they're tweeting about it. So it's like, yeah, they're probably aiming for fall. So now let's talk about the big news story here. Sony has sold 2.1 million PlayStation 4s worldwide so far. Last week, PlayStation 4 officially launched in all those other countries, not just North America. Did really well, obviously. 700,000 in Europe, 250,000 in the UK. Fastest selling console in the UK, a new record broke right there. PlayStation 4 is looking pretty good. Sony's doing a pretty good job, are they not? 2.1 million, a pretty nice, starting install base number, setting records left and right. Good. It's all good news so far, of course. But how about the long term? Let's perhaps talk about that. Now, these initial numbers are absolutely good, right? That's great that they're it looks like the console market's healthier than ever, and it did. Sony did really well leading up into the PS4, without a doubt. It also goes to the fact that Microsoft had a lot of missteps, but Sony also had a lot of the right direction this time around, and they were much different from the PS3 launch, and I think. The one thing going into this is how strong they were going into this launch instead of the PS3 launch. Whereas with the PS3 launch, $600 price point, they were getting the bad PR and they didn't have a whole lot of strong, titles going into it, at least for a whole year. So yeah, they're absolutely doing good this time around. And of course, yes, basically, so right now, I guess if you want to play numbers, hard numbers against the competition, Sony already beat Nintendo's install base in the UK. And they're already extremely well caught up to the Wii U's install base, but Wii U's that's a whole other scenario. And if you want to directly compare it right to Microsoft, then they're pretty much almost close to doubling their install base. But these are extremely early numbers, so it's not fixate on them. And I think that's something to really think about too. Let's really fixate on the day one numbers. They're absolutely great, right? But the long term is what's important. I think it goes without saying that most hardware launches, most product launches, if there's enough excitement going into them, you're going to move a lot of units day one. It's just, the staying power of that product and how well it's going to do over a significant amount of time. With the PlayStation 3, it had a very soft launch, and it took a lot of steam to actually finally get it going. A lot of games, a lot of price cuts, a lot of added features, a lot of marketing, which, sometimes wasn't even good marketing because, Sony's not good at marketing sometimes. But it took them a lot to finally get where they are with the PS3, which is, good, granted, because they did really bad with the PS3. They lost a lot of money with the PS3, so now they're caught up in that regards. But Sony's Andrew House, Sony Computer Entertainment CEO and president, was talking about how he thinks that, PS4 lifetime sales are going to exceed the PlayStation 3. Now, granted, the PS3 is at 80 million right now, and it's still going to be selling more, so he feels that it's going to do more than the PS3. He also feels, though, that, and Sony in general thinks the PS4 life cycle is going to be shorter than the PS3. So you got a system that's going to have a shorter life cycle, but you're expecting it to do better numbers. Now, I think the enthusiasm for better numbers is because, again, they went into this so much better than they did with the PS3. You got a $200 cheaper box from last time. You've got actual, good, compelling software to release with it. And your direct competition made a lot of missteps, which in this case really did help Sony this time around. But Microsoft's staying lean, they're staying mean, and they're doing really, they're catching up now. They've got positive press going, so now it's, it could be neck and neck down the line. But it's not even about just competing with Microsoft. You're competing for pretty much everything because you want that consumer to pay for your product. So what is it going to take for the PlayStation 4 to do really well over that time period? Obviously, I think the one thing Sony always does well is software, whether it's up front or whether it's down the line. And in PlayStation's case, it's always been down the line. They've never had strong launches. It's always down the line with PlayStation hardware. PS1, PS2, PSP, PS3. PS Vita had a really good launch actually, but more often than not, down the line is when all that software comes. And again, we've always stressed this. Sony owns all these studios. We know they've got these developers. They're working on titles, so we can certainly expect them. But nowadays, that's not what it takes to get people to buy things. Out of those 80 million PS3s that are currently sold right now, a very large majority of those are casual consumers, not people that just are invested in the industry like you and me. I think a really good example to look at is how the PS3 was the number one streaming device for Netflix for the television. The number one streaming box for the television was a PlayStation 3, which is really awesome, right? But it also shows that the market's rapidly changing and people are looking for different things out of these products. Whether gamers want that or not, it's the fact that you do have to offer certain things out of this product now. And I think when it comes to gamers, people like you and me that have definitely loved games, that definitely are going to play video games, more often than not, we're going to buy the box, whether it's up front or 5 years from now. You've got Xbox 360 people just now buying PS3s and catching up on that stuff. You've got tons of people that have owned 360s, tons of people that buy Wii's, some, to play Nintendo's for strong first party, 3DS because it's got great software, right? Gamers that want games are going to play games, right? So whether gamers buy a PS4 now or later, I think it's safe to say eventually, people will buy the PS4 for its games, right? But if you look at sort of that casual market and the kind of people that make up the bulk sales of these consoles, look at the PS2 and PS1, for example. Back in that sort of time frame, the only place to really play games was, a console. Or you could do it on a computer too, but that back then affordability was also a really strong thing. It always heavily favored consoles in terms of power and price and all that. So it was for games, it was always to get a console or a handheld back then. Now you're in a market where you've got all this other stuff, and despite the fact that, mobile and tablets and all that other junk, right, it's not necessarily a threat to the console market, but it's certainly going to discourage people, today from buying them. Now, granted, this is a very, very, very rough comparison, so don't tear me apart for this one, but look at the iPad, for example. Now, that's a consumer device that appeals to not just one specific task, but a bunch of tasks. And, tablets in general, and when Apple releases a new tablet, or even when Samsung releases a new tablet, they do fairly well. They sell millions and millions and they release, yearly, for some hardware makers, every 6 months they release these things, and they do so well. But they're, of course, appealing to a very broad audience, Consoles are every 5 to 6 years, and they're only appealing to a certain group of people, which is why in the past generation, PS3 and 360, they didn't do just games, they did all sorts of stuff. And the Wii, for example, had a really, again, it had a gimmick to it, and that did make it sell like crazy to a market that usually wouldn't buy games. So it kind of makes me wonder where PS4 and Xbox One's hardware sales are going to cap off at, when these things are done being manufactured, what are their numbers going to sit at? And will it beat PS3's at 80 million? That's it's way too early to even tell, of course. It's way too early to tell. So you have to ask yourself, what are Sony and Microsoft going to do to have that staying power that, to keep them relevant to people that wouldn't normally buy games? Because like I said, I think for most gamers, we are going to buy these machines. Even if you don't have them now, you'll certainly have them 3-4 years from now when they become more affordable and there's more compelling software for you. We will buy them, Now, one very interesting thing that happened this week that kind of folds nicely into this current news story is that Sony Pictures is reportedly bringing original content to PlayStation Network and just, PlayStation platforms exclusively. If you go to Sony's PSN advertising site, you can see a little box for Sony Pictures. You click it and it says Sony Pictures is going to be bringing original content to PSN. And this was kind of just spotted this week. Kind of went a little under the radar for most people, most news stories. But it's an interesting theory, original content, not just theory, but reality, original content coming to PSN. Now, Sony did this with the PlayStation 3. They did the Tester, which was that little reality show they released on PSN where people could, be on a little reality show to try and get a job at Sony, which was, I feel like that was sort of testing them testing the waters a little bit. They had they were monetized episodes. They had commercials in them, but they released these episodes for free to download. It's kind of interesting, it certainly didn't move PlayStation 3s by any stretch of the imagination. People didn't buy PS3s for this thing. But you've got Sony Pictures involved, and this is a very big part of Sony Corporation in general. Could this possibly move PS4s? Do you have some sort of a nice, awesome, original show just on PlayStation, assuming you ship enough units for people to have it in their home, for people to watch it, for the word to get out that there's the show out, that you need to get a PlayStation 4 for it? I highly doubt that sort of scenario would take place, but it kind of gets conversation going about the platform and that it has these things that aren't just games, and like I said, again, that's kind of what it takes nowadays for people to buy these machines, and that's really kind of the unfortunate reality of it. Now, I'm not sure that I wouldn't even label that as unfortunate. I'm perfectly fine with having my PlayStation 4 and Xbox One do things beyond gaming, right? I don't even watch cable anymore. I haven't watched cable in 2 years. When I came home for the past 3 years, the first thing I would do is boot up my PS3 and start up any sort of streaming service I had on the system, or anything I had saved locally to the hard drive, or I'd just listen to music on it. I'd listen to podcasts on it. It was a multimedia device, It was like a second computer to me, which was awesome. So that could be that my scenario could be that for tons of other people. But like I said, they got stiff competition with these streaming boxes and tablets and all that. They've got all this other competition. So I think for Sony, it's like, making a really compelling box. You got great software, you got streaming services, it can do this, it can do that. It's, it's somewhat affordable, maybe compared to your competition, because Sony's been very aggressive with that lately. Do all sorts of stuff to tell you, like, hey, you need this gosh darn device. Like I said, the initial sales for next-gen consoles are certainly encouraging, right? They were fantastic. They exceeded their past generations quite nicely, which is good. But again, it's kind of like the new freshness going into a new hardware thing. You're going to sell these units. You're going to have a nice, big, successful launch. So, I don't know. You can't really judge it this early just yet. I know, like I said last week, I firmly believe these consoles are still relevant today. They still have life in them. It's just a matter of how well they're going to do now compared to in the past. Now, do I think the PlayStation 4 is going to outsell the PlayStation 3? I'm going to say no, because I think the PS3 still has a whole lot of life in it. 80 million is a pretty big number, and like I said, I still think it's going to sell more over time. So I'm inclined to say no, that the PS4 might not reach PS3's numbers. But that's just my opinion. I guess, I could be totally wrong about that. But that's kind of how I see it. But I still firmly believe, like I said, consoles are relevant. They're totally still alive. They're still selling millions of units. Software is still getting sold. Gaming is actually pretty alive and well. So, yeah, I don't think it's going away. Like I said, I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Well, that ends my sort of PS4 sales long-term scenario kind of analysis talk kind of thing. Really wasn't a big news week this past week, at least for PlayStation news. Not a whole lot going on. That's partly because the VGXs are, well, tomorrow. So again, it used to be the VGAs, Video Game Awards. Now they're the VGXs. They're tomorrow, and there's going to be some world premieres. A lot of world premieres. I think they're gonna have the most. They're saying that they're gonna this year's the most world premieres they've ever had. Pretty much everybody's got something to show. Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo. Everybody's gonna be there. It's going to, like, whether you like watching that crap or not, because it kind of is usually with all the celebrity endorsements and all that. But whether you like it or not, it's going to have some stuff. It's going to be a big event. So pretty much everything I'm saying right now is going to be really irrelevant tomorrow, because, like, all the big news is going to come out then. So so I'm not going to be covering it, basically, is what I'm saying. I mean, we will be covering it, just not now, obviously, because this is every Friday. But it's tomorrow, so obviously, keep an eye out. Watch the internet if you want to just check the blogs and everything, or actually watch the event. But Sony's got stuff to show. In terms of what I clearly don't know. We'll probably see, like, more of the Order 1886, like we were just talking about, possibly. Could see some more Infamous Second Son. Could see a game announcement. I think we should start seeing more game announcements soon. That would be the place to save it for. We could possibly see more Uncharted PS4, but I kind of doubt it, just because it was a teaser. And Naughty Dog's already said straight up, like, it's still a long ways off. So, but that is tomorrow, so check that out. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you so much for talking with me. I'll see you next Friday.